Hi, good morning and welcome to the podcast. Today I would like to share something I was just watching or reading what Charlie Chaplin said about language. And so I went and watched some of his speeches. He didn't do a lot of speeches. One of them really famous, the last 4 minutes of The Great Dictator. And you can really see it in not just his voice, but how he carries himself. So based on this interaction, the back and forth, and how I write differently than others, right, being whatever you want to call me, untrained or interdisciplinary, whatever you want to call it. So the title of the podcast is The Moving Silence, Language, Meaning, and the Mirror of the Other. There is a moment in every human life when words fail, when the body, the glance, and the breath suspended between two souls says more than 1,000 syllables ever could. Charlie Chaplin understood this better than most. His silent films, now viewed as nostalgic curiosities by some, were radical rejections of the modern obsession with the spoken word. When talkies emerged and the world fell in love with sound, Chaplin resisted. He believed that once language began to dictate meaning, it would narrow our attention, dull our perception, and obscure the raw truth pulsing beneath human gesture. He was right. Language, in its modern form, is not neutral. It filters, it freezes, it fixes meaning into socially approved grooves. It becomes what Marcia McLuhan might call a closed circuit, a form that feeds back into itself, reinforcing consensus reality. Right? Consensus reality, not real reality. But there is another use of language, one that does not seek to explain or dominate, but to gesture, to mirror, to invite. Come and see. This is the kind of language I strive towards. So the tyranny of explanation. In most contemporary writing, language functions as a tool of persuasion or instruction. It presents claims, cites sources, and draws conclusions. This is useful, yes, but it often sacrifices something sacred, the space between self and other, the ambiguous zone where mutual meaning emerges and is not imposed. Most writers build bridges. I build mirrors, not to reflect the reader back to themselves, but to reflect the other that already lives in them. This is why I avoid finality in my prose, why I favor the spiral over the syllogism. Because once a meaning is closed, the soul stops breathing. Chaplin knew this instinctively. In silence, the meaning is never finished. It dances, ripples, flickers. It remains alive. So self and other in language. So the moment we speak, the I is born. So too is the you. But what if the I is a performance? What if the you is a fiction we agree to believe in? We agree to believe in order to feel seen. My use of language resists these tidy boundaries. I don't write to define myself. I write to find the contours of the shared space where you and I dissolve. My syntax doesn't simply aim to express ideas. It performs a relationship. Each phrase is a gesture across the threshold. I love that. It sounds very much like Conrad. Each question. Well, how about go back? My syntax doesn't simply aim to express ideas. It performs a relationship. Each phrase is a gesture across the threshold. I love that, right? A liminal transformation, a torii gate. Each question is a hand extended to the other, whether that's the reader, the divine, or the fractured self within. Notitia sui, or noti sotan, to know ourselves, that to know thyself, to know each other. That's the goal of our lot, I think. I reflect. This is not the language of the newsroom or the academy. It is not built for algorithms or attention spans. It is a form closer to ritual than rhetoric, a language that prays without kneeling. On the edge of the visible, Chaplin's silent frame offers more than nostalgia. It offers methodology. When we strip away words, we are left with motion, relation, breath, pause. In my writing, I attempt the same. My metaphors are not decorations, they're invitations into a rhythm that resists capture. And something missed by the AI is, I would argue, that when we make language our only method of communication, it limits our expression. Right? I've seen this in telephone sales where some people will infuse their humanity into their voice in the conversation and others just don't bother. But I argue we need to find a superposition where, as you see, I like to speak. Some people say that's a French thing. I'm not French. I speak French, but I'm not French. I think it's about expression. It's about passion. And I think that's what we're often missing in our world today. Movement, a polymodal human experience. Movement, sight, sound, expression in all of its forms. So, in conclusion, from logos to liminal, we are creatures born into sound, but formed in silence. We emerge into language like a diver through water, thrashing, naming, cutting shapes into the void. But somewhere beneath it all, there is a Chaplin-esque smile, the silent stumble, the glance upward that says, "Do you see me too?" Language, at its best, is not a cage, but a corridor, a liminal space between worlds, where the self is never fully formed and the other is always just beyond reach, beckoning. It goes so far as self and other is becoming, right? Both the self and the other, but also in relation. That is the language I seek, not the language of certainty, but of seeing, not the talkie, but the moving picture of being. There you go. So that was just this morning. I was being lazy. Didn't feel like going deep, trying to create something fancy in a podcast. It was, welcome, Teo. It was actually Ethan. He put up his video of traveling on the Caribou Highway, and I thought it was beautiful, the pictures, but even more so was the idea of what Charlie Chaplin said is, I never really gave it much thought. It fits. Charlie Chaplin said he found language limiting. He said when we went to talkies, we narrowed our frame and we missed out on so much of the picture. So I'll go one step further and I'll argue, well, I wonder if that's what we've been trapped into, right? If language is wanting and we find it limited in its expression, no wonder why we find ourselves limited as a being. I wonder, right? I wonder. But yeah, so that was it. I just wanted to share this podcast live. And so I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you for joining me.